that's Beth. The pretty one is Meg, and the curly-haired one is Amy, I believe. Laurie paused and then added shyly, I often hear you talking to each other. Sometimes, when I see you all sitting around the table with your mother, it's like looking at a picture. Laurie poked the fire to hide the sudden trembling of his lips. Joe was touched. While he was unwell and lonely, she was happy at home with her mother and sisters. You could just come and visit us, she said gently. Mother would be glad to welcome you, and you'll have jolly times with my sisters and me. Wouldn't your grandpa let you? I think he would, if I asked. He's very kind, but he thinks I might disturb strangers, said Laurie. We are not strangers. We are your neighbors, and you won't disturb us. Then Joe and Laurie started talking about books. Joe was delighted to find that Laurie also loved books and had read more books than her. If you like them so much, come down to our library, Laurie offered. Grandpa isn't home. Don't be afraid. I'm not afraid of anything, Joe replied, tossing her head. Laurie laughed and led her through the rooms. He let her examine whatever struck her fancy. At last, they reached the library, where Joe clapped her hands and danced with delight. It was lined with books, and then there were pictures and statues, strange little tables, and bronze pieces. And best of all, a great open fireplace with quaint tiles all round it. What richness! Sighed Joe, sinking into a chair and gazing around her. Theodore Lawrence, you should be the happiest boy in the world. No one can live on books, said Laurie, shaking his head as he perched on a table. Just then, a bell rang, and Joe flew up, alarmed. It's your grandpa. What shall I do? Well, what if it is? You said you are not afraid of anything, remember? Said Laurie, laughing. But it was only the doctor who had come to check on Laurie. Would you mind if I left you for a minute? Laurie asked. Joe shook her head and went off to look at a portrait of old Mr. Lawrence. She was still standing before the portrait when the door opened again. Joe did not turn as she said, I won't be afraid of your grandpa. He looks stern, but he has kind eyes, and I like him. Thank you, ma'am, said a gruff voice behind her. And there, to Joe's great dismay, stood old Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Lawrence is very amused and invites Joe to tea. There, as Joe and Laurie talk merrily, Mr. Lawrence realizes how lonely Laurie had been and decides to send Laurie to the Marches' house occasionally.